Alright, here we go. Trying to film and going in Sacramento, SF. Let's just goes back a little bit. Okay. Here we go. Hi there. My name is Vincent. I came in earlier and I was speaking with Alani Kim, and this is the number she gave me to call her back. Yeah, sure. If she can get in touch with me tonight before, I guess, 5, I guess. I don't know. It's not a whole lot of time left. If not, I guess I'll call back after that. Yes, sir. Thank you. You too.
wonderful, cheerful character.
I gotta give it to Abe Lincoln.
That's Ted Widmer of Brown University. He has a son, and his babysitting vote goes to Lincoln.
He had young children. He doted over them. He had trouble sleeping, so he was available late at night.
Aha, an important qualification and one that we didn't think of.
I think when Lincoln was a younger man, he would not have been a great babysitter.
A Lincoln naysayer, Doris Kearns Goodwin, author of a number of presidential biographies and mother of 3 boys.
She did a background check on the young Abe Lincoln, and she found a man too involved in his own thoughts, too apt to get wrapped up in deep conversations while walking on the street.
When he would be carrying a kid or rolling them along in a stroller, he would forget about the child and simply walk on, leaving the kid on the pathway.
But Doris Kearns Goodwin says experience and age make all the difference. A much older Lincoln tops her list of presidential babysitters.
The kids in the White House were allowed to run around the corridors of the hallways, put on plays in the attic. They would set off the servants' bells at the same time. They were lively and fun. He would read to them. He allowed them to be children.
So there you have it, with 2 votes out of 5. Abe Lincoln wins. He is the top babysitter pick among past presidents in our informal Civil War.
But who's on backup for date night? Honest Abe isn't available.
Teddy Roosevelt seemed to be a lot of fun.
He was just a stunningly active father. Teddy Roosevelt had a thirst for adventure.
Ole, Teddy Roosevelt, and Doris Kearns Goodwin says the kids would be big.
He would have been willing to play cowboys and Indians with them, get on the floor, spar with them, wrestle with them. Now, her parents might not have been as great, or they might have come home with a cut shave or even a broken limb.
In other words, too much Rough Rider, not enough teddy bear.
I wonder what the living film was. And there's always Home Alone.
You're listening to All Things Considered from This is All Things Considered from
And I'm Robert Siegel. One of the most critically acclaimed shows on cable television returns tonight. A long wait, but is not dead. It's American Horror Story, which tied me for the most Emmy nominations this year. As NPR's Netta Ulaby reports, the new season of American Horror Story, like Mad Men, also takes place in the 1960s.
Okay, the similarities basically end there. This period piece is set in an insane asylum run by a grim-faced nun. It's like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, written by Stephen King. Set is a warren of tiny dog groomers, carpenters, and electricians piecing together a creepy mental war fitted with crucifixes, iron pots, and restraining devices. Actors shamble around, faces made up to be livid and bruised. One man is strapped into a painful-looking harness. Is that a stunt thing, or is that a straitjacket thing that you got lost? Soon, the stuntman's dangling several stories above the asylum's spooky stairwell. But the show's best source of chills does not need special effects. That would be its star, Jessica Lange.
Elfman, get your hands out of your pants.
So, who is a treasure of American theater? A 2-time Oscar winner slumming on a lurid TV horror show. To be perfectly honest, I was at a low point in my life. Lange was reportedly separated from Sam Shepard, a partner of almost 30 years. Around that time, she was offered a part on American Horror Story's first season as an uncanny Southern lady. You should stop unearthing while you're ahead. It only brings a haunting. We have a responsibility as caretakers to the old lands, to show some respect. The role was written for Jessica Lange because the show's creators saw her play Blanche in A Streetcar Named Desire on Broadway. There's something when somebody is writing specifically for you, and I could tell that he understood showrunner, Ryan Murphy, says he wanted to expose Lang's talent to young people who never saw her in Tootsie or Frances or King Kong. Murphy has no fewer than 3 shows on TV right now: Glee, The New Normal, and American Horror Story.
I've always loved horror, and I think that it gets a bum rap. People think that it can't be artistic or about something, but I would disagree. I think it always is about something.
For example, owning a house. The first season of American Horror Story concerned a modern-day couple who find themselves trapped in their dream home.
It's a classic LA Victorian, built around 1920 by the doctor. It's just fabulous.
A haunted house is a perfect metaphor, says horror scholar Drew Beard, for the recent foreclosure crisis.
Your ownership of the house is up in the air because other horses have this claim on the same walls, floors, doors that you do.
And it was audacious, says Beard, for show creator Ryan Murphy to completely jettison the original haunted house storyline and start afresh with the insane asylum. And Murphy did something else surprising. He brought back some of the first season stars and cast them as brand new characters.
When I was in college, I used to go to New York City Musicals, and I used to love seeing all those people playing different parts. I thought how wonderful that must have been for him to call up his great pal and say, hey kid, we're writing you something.
So last season's high school shooter is now a helpless mental patient. Jessica Lange's gone from a nosy next-door neighbor to a nun running an asylum with an iron loophole. Series creator Ryan Murphy says the horror in this season's American Horror Story comes partly from setting it in a mental institution in 1968.
If you're a woman, your husband could have you locked up literally for liking sex too much, or you could be locked up for being a lesbian, or you could be locked up for having interracial romance.
In just the short time that I've been here, I have witnessed appalling things. Candidly, I'm shocked.
It's a madhouse, Doctor. What did you expect?
I expected some form of treatment, therapy. Sister, your hospital still administers electroshock therapy to treat homosexuality. It's barbaric. Behavior modification is the current standard.
The show takes on science and religion, but there's also aliens and Nazis. Having Jessica Lange on board means it gets taken seriously. So, creator Ryan Murphy called actress Chloe Sevigny, caught on the prestigious HBO series, and offered her a role.
So I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but it does star Jessica Lange, so right there, like world-class enjoyment. And number 2, if you want to see you play an infomaniac, Jessica shaves you after all the first episode. I think Chloe was going to see you.
You think I'm full of shame and regret for what I've done now, sister? You could shave me balls to cue ball and I'll still be the hottest tamale in the street.
Murphy says this season is feminist horror, and a true showcase for Jessica Lange.
I can't wait till she goes insane. That's my favorite thing that I'm like living for. We have a very great last episode that I told her about.
But he's not giving away any other secrets. Netta Ulupi, NPR News.
The Argentine writer Cesar Aira has published dozens of books in his native Spanish. The latest to be translated into English came out this week, and author Pablo Medina says it's captivating.
Cesar Aira's novel, The Miracle Cures of Dr. Aira, is short. It's only 80 pages, but it's so intense and full of absurdity and philosophy that it feels longer. It has these great details: evil arch-enemies, suspicious men disguised as doctors, an ambulance that only goes in a straight line. The book centers on Dr. Aira, but don't confuse him with the author, even though they have the same name. Dr. Aira likes to wander through the streets, and as he walks around, he thinks up miracle cures to imagined illnesses. He also has a nemesis, the sinister Dr. Acton. He's the chief of medicine at the local hospital, and he's out to disprove Aira's cures. Just as Aira decides that he will never perform a miracle and become a writer instead, something happens. He's asked to cure a man with cancer. Cesar Aira writes that the doctor's head was crackling as if it were full of soda, and he accepts the challenge. Aira decides to create a parallel universe where the sick man's death is not possible. By the time he's done, the room has become a universe where the patient can't die. Cesar Aira's books often have an element of quirky absurdity, and busy living in the hero's mind, and it's so wonderfully eccentric. The book is hard to put down.
Pablo Medina is the author of Cubop City Blues. He reviewed The Miracle Cures of Dr. Ira by Cesar Ira.
This is NPR News.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Melissa Block.
And I'm Robert Siegel. In 2011, Pakistan had more cases of polio than any other country in the world, 198. Late last year, Pakistan's government declared a national emergency. It then embarked on an aggressive campaign to eradicate the virus, with help from a number of powerful institutions, including the World Health Organization and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Beating polio in Pakistan required new strategies, and so far the results are promising. But NPR's Jackie Northam reports that some endemic problems remain.
When the international community swooped in to help Pakistan, it erased many of the problems that had plagued the government's earlier efforts. Corruption, inefficiency, mismanagement. Things that got so bad at one point, 7- and 8-year-olds were sent out to vaccinate children just a few years younger than themselves. But as part of a new national campaign, the WHO, UNICEF, and others streamlined the eradication effort, and 250,000 trained vaccinators fanned out across the country. So far, the results have been promising. The number of new polio cases is about a third of last year's total. But the new campaign, like earlier efforts, has been unable to overcome one critical problem. That is, getting into parts of Pakistan's lawless tribal regions. Shanaz Wazir-Ali, Pakistan's point person for polio, says the area that runs along the border with Afghanistan is incredibly difficult to access.
First of all, the terrain is probably one of the roughest in the world. It is rugged, it is mountainous, it's craggy, we do not have roads and pathways everywhere. This is a traditionally tribal society, and no one from outside can access those communities because there are very, very strict tribal laws.
Wazir-Ali says about 75% of Pakistan's polio cases can be traced back to certain areas of the tribal region, which is a base for the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and other Islamist groups. It's a volatile, dangerous area.
In certain areas, we've not been able to access children for more than 3 years. Because of military operations, because of the American drone strikes, because of the reaction to what the Americans and other countries are doing in Afghanistan.
In July, the Taliban flat-out banned any polio teams from entering North and South Waziristan until the U.S. drone attacks stopped. There are wild rumors about the polio vaccine. It'll make the children sterile. It contains the AIDS virus, and many believe vaccinators are CIA agents. It's hard enough getting into parts of the tribal region, but the population, mostly Pashtuns, are also highly mobile, often leaving the tribal area to escape the danger or to find work, and taking the polio virus with them. Checkpoints have been set up on major thoroughfares and at railway stations across the country. At this one, outside of Islamabad, 21-year-old Khan Wali scrutinizes every car that goes by to see if there's a child under 5. Police officers stand next to him to make sure the car stops. Wali asks the parents if the baby has been vaccinated, and he checks the child's finger. If there's a blue mark on the nail, that means the child has been recently inoculated. If not, Wali pulls a vial out of a blue cooler and tips the vaccine into the child's mouth. The whole thing takes less than a minute. Elias Jury, who leads Pakistan's polio eradication program for the WHO, says this is a good way to catch those children who would not otherwise be inoculated. Many children are malnourished and aren't very healthy, so their immune system is very weak, and they will need several doses of the vaccine. There are already 10 scheduled polio campaigns a year, and yet Jury says he knows they're missing so many children.
When you look into different parts of the country, almost each time we have almost many children at one point that we are not able to access.
And for every child that exhibits polio paralysis, there are more than 100 carrying and transmitting the virus. A stream of muddy-looking water flows between steep, garbage-strewn hills in the city of Rawalpindi, next to the capital, Islamabad. The stench is enough to make your eyes water.
It's an open
sewage. We don't have the sewage system. Before, there was one pumping station and all, but that's not working.
Dr. Pervez Youssef with the WHO says once a month the fetid sewage water in Rawalpindi is tested for the polio virus. He watches as a health worker rolls up his trouser legs and heads down the steep hill with a bucket in his hand to collect a sample. Rawalpindi is considered a high-risk area for polio.
We have taken the sample from the sewage and now we are packing it in a special bottle.
The sample is sent to a nearby lab by motorcycle. As the international campaign in Pakistan takes effect, far fewer areas are showing the polio virus in the sewage water. But not Rawalpindi. It usually tests positive for the virus. Still, there have only been 3 full-blown cases of polio discovered in the city over the past couple of years. Recently, a 3-year-old Pashtun boy was diagnosed here. After that, teams of vaccinators spread through the Pashtun slums in Rawalpindi and neighboring Islamabad. The slums are congested and filthy. There's no sanitation and the children are in rags. The vaccinators go house to house looking for children and delivering extra doses of the polio vaccine.
This shows the team has visited this house and administer drops to children.
Healthcare workers examine the writing left by vaccinators on an old wooden door. It details how many children are there and whether they were inoculated. But the healthcare workers need to double-check that no child was missed. Khadija Kubra with the health department checks if all the children in this compound were given the additional dosage. Both children have the telltale mark on their fingernail. Kubra moves on to the next house. After a short while, she catches up with a team of female vaccinators.
And
3 women, their faces covered with veils, carry a cooler containing the polio vaccine. It can be dangerous. Some vaccinators have been attacked. Another was killed in a slum in the southern city of Karachi this summer. These women say they have had no problem. They say many of the mothers ask a similar question.
They are asking questions repeatedly. Why are you again and again administering the polio drops? We have to tell them there's a polio case in Rawalpindi, and we will, inshallah, come back in a week.
Tribal region, on a hilltop, or under a bridge, the healthcare workers have to routinely vaccinate every single one of the country's 34 million children if Pakistan wants to eradicate polio once and for all. Jackie Northam, NPR News.
Our series, Chasing Down Polio, concludes tomorrow with a report on India's success in stopping the spread of the disease. You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Now, a story about the intersection of privacy and decency. It involves the social media site Reddit, a star maker on the internet. Ideas bubble up from its anonymous contributors and often take off across the web, into blogs, Twitter, even the mainstream media. Reddit calls itself the front page of the internet. But Reddit also has dark corners, racist rants, threads devoted to sexual violence against women, photographs of unsuspecting people taken by voyeurs, and now a big pusher of offensive content, a man who went by the handle Violent Acres, has been unmasked. Adrian Chen did the unmasking. He's a reporter for the website Gawker, and he told the world last week that Violent Acres is really a Texas programmer named Michael Brutch. Adrian Chen joins me now from New York. Adrian, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You call Michael Brutch the biggest troll on the web. Why don't you help us understand what a troll is?
Well, a troll is somebody who tries to get the biggest reaction from people on the internet by being as outrageous and offensive as possible.
Okay, and when you say the content is as offensive as possible, Brutch was a creator of a number of sections. As you put it, he issued an unending fountain of racism, porn, gore, misogyny, and incest. So let's talk about one section he created, which was a photo site called Jailbait. What was it?
Jailbait was a section dedicated to pictures of mostly scantily clad underage girls, and a lot of them were taken from their social media profiles, like Facebook or Flickr accounts, and then put in front of people who were basically sexually attracted to underage girls.
And we're not going to go into some of the other sections because they're extremely offensive, but was any of the content that Brutch was responsible for putting up there illegal?
No, not that I can tell, and he swears that he would take down anything that was illegal on any of the sections that he moderated.
And just to be clear about Michael Brutch, he was posting this content, but he also had more of a role within Reddit itself, right? He was some sort of volunteer administrator. How would you describe what he did there?
Well, Reddit is run by a handful of paid employees, but their real power comes from thousands, 20,000 about community moderators who are volunteers, and he was one of those moderators in charge of filtering out spam, acting as kind of an editor of these other sections, and he was one of the most powerful because he'd been around for a long time, and he moderated 400 about subsections that were among the most popular.
When you figured out the identity of Violent Acres and were talking to Michael Brutch and letting him know you were going to out him, you were going to unmask him, what was his reaction?
He was actually surprisingly calm on the phone when I called him. He kind of begged me not to publish his name. He said he would get fired, that he had a disabled wife who would lose her health insurance, and he also owned up to everything. He said, I stand by exactly what I have done, and just please don't tell people my name.
There is an irony to somebody who violates privacy in everything he posts, begging for privacy, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I actually really do value anonymity on the internet, but I feel like it's not a universal good or a right, and it's something that we should really value to the extent that it helps less powerful people protect themselves from powerful people and say things that powerful people might not like. And Michael Brutch was actually using his anonymity to take advantage of vulnerable people, the women and the unsuspecting girls that he posted, and I don't think that that's a legitimate rationale for anonymity, and so I felt okay with taking that away.
Now, you published Michael Brutch's identity less than a week ago. Since then, it's been reported that he's been fired from his real-life job as a payday lender. What other fallout has there been from this?
Well, he has taken to Reddit to try to get a new job. Actually, he's been advertising himself as a programmer for adult websites. Reddit CEO has been pretty quiet, but the other day he posted to a private forum for moderators and staff of Reddit saying that Reddit stands by free speech, that they won't delete any offensive material, and he spoke out against a ban that a lot of the moderators had implemented on Gawker links in retaliation for me publishing this article.
And what about all those sections on Reddit that Violent Acres was moderating?
Well, a lot of them have been shut down either since he went away or even before that. Jailbait, which was his most famous one, was shut down after Anderson Cooper covered it on CNN and there was a lot of outcry. Creep Shots was another one that was dedicated to posting voyeuristic snapshots of women, and that had been shut down, although there are other clones springing up. Reddit said that they won't shut down that kind of content.
Adrian Chen is a staff writer at the website Gawker. Adrian, thanks very much.
Thank you.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Melissa Block.
And I'm Robert Siegel. Last night's second presidential debate produced more friction and fireworks than the first. But that didn't seem to bother a group of voters in a state that knows a lot about political bickering, Wisconsin. NPR's David Schaefer watched the debate with roughly a dozen Democrats and Republicans who dedicated themselves to bridging their state's political divide.
Thank you. Nice meeting you as well.
They're all smiles, this group of both staunch liberals and conservatives, as they greet one another at Mariners Inn, on the outskirts of Madison, Wisconsin. But just like in a high school lunchroom, they sit with their own, tables of right and left, as the debate begins.
Good evening from Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York. I'm Candy Crowley from CNN State of the Union.
The group is called Reach Out Wisconsin, formed in the wake of the sharp and bitter divide that gaped open in the state after the election of Governor Scott Walker almost 2 years ago. More is to foster respect and understanding of politics with civil discourse. But that doesn't stop at least a few from snickering at some of the president's answers, such as this explanation of why gas prices were so much lower when he took office.
Because the economy was on the verge of collapse.
opposed to Mitt Romney's promotion of more drilling for oil and gas. When it's over, Wisconsinites on both sides say this is the best debate yet.
I do like it when they let the candidates talk to one another.
Scott Cravens is a conservative and co-founder of Reach Out Wisconsin. He says he enjoys watching the candidates sniping and sparring back and forth.
Because I think those are some of the most honest spots in the debate. Because that's unscripted, that's where they're going back and forth, and it's rapid fire. You think on your feet. I think that's when what they really think starts to come out.
Cravens gives Mitt Romney high marks for his debate, especially on jobs and the economy. But he also thinks President Obama did quite well. His wife, Carol Cravens, says Mr. Obama has trouble with the facts, especially his response to the attack on the American consulate in Libya.
If you're talking about being the truthful, no, I will give him that for flunking the truth.
For liberal Ron Dolan, it was good to see a presidential comeback.
You can't just roll over like, Obama did in the first debate. You have to show a little backbone. And he did that. And he stuck to his guns. He was a little more spirited, didn't seem completely out of it.
But Dolan says he actually thinks Mitt Romney is the better debater.
Good for Romney. He does look presidential. But at the same time, when he's telling me he's an advocate for women's rights, renewable energy, the middle class, I mean, he's more of a snake oil salesman. He's selling me something. I don't believe him.
But the left-leaning Dolan says the president was selling him something too when trying to defend his jobs right. Conservative Todd Osborne of Cross Plains, Wisconsin, says he found both candidates to be shading the truth.
They seldom tell a flat-out lie. They tell a part of the story, or the part they want you to know, and immediately leave out the rest.
It's a point of agreement with many of the dozen or so here, and while no one will be changing votes after this debate, all say they enjoy hearing from those with opposing views. Susan Kimball of Spring Green, Wisconsin, who is attending her first Reach Out Wisconsin event, puts it this way.
It's nice to hear both sides. And people have respect for each other's opinions instead of animosity and anger.
And all agree there is far too little of that in politics today. David Schaefer, NPR News in Madison, Wisconsin.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Melissa Blau.
And I'm Robert Siegel. We begin this hour with major fallout for Lance Armstrong. Last week's scathing report of the U.S. anti-doping agency linked Armstrong to a widespread doping program in cycling. Today, Armstrong stepped down as chairman of the foundation Livestrong, which he created to support those with cancer. Armstrong also lost major sponsors, including longtime supporter Nike. NPR's Tom Goldman begins our coverage.
Livestrong, Lance Armstrong said in a statement Wednesday, is incredibly dear to my heart. To spare the foundation any negative effects as a result of controversy surrounding my cycling career, I will conclude my chairmanship, he said. A startling statement for sure, and we'll hear more from the foundation's CEO after this report. But first, a major and very public Armstrong supporter has reconsidered. Last week's U.S. Anti-Doping Agency report appeared damning with its 200 pages online, showing, in the words of the report, extensive banned drug use by Lance Armstrong and a massive and pervasive doping program designed in large part to benefit him. Still, there was, as always, that Lance Armstrong cushion of support, including his corporate sponsors. The biggest one, Nike, said at the time, Lance has stated his innocence and has been unwavering on this position. Nike plans to continue to support Lance and the Lance Armstrong Foundation. Today, Nike reaffirmed its support for the foundation, but said this about Armstrong. Due to the seemingly insurmountable evidence that Lance Armstrong participated in doping and misled Nike for more than a decade, it is with great sadness that we have terminated our contract with him.
It's a big day today, so I think that our message carried a long way.
Former pro cyclist Paul Willerton led a small protest outside Nike's Beaverton, Oregon headquarters yesterday. He showed up at 6 a.m. in the pouring rain, carrying a sign asking Nike to stand up for clean sport and let Armstrong go. As employees arrived for work, he said he got a few middle fingers and thumbs down, but also honks and smiles and thumbs up. Today, Willerton praised Nike for getting the message.
That people will not tolerate the use of corporations to further their cause and to further non-truths.
It makes a nice story to think a band of 10 or so protesters moved a Fortune 500 company to take a moral stand. University of Oregon sports marketing expert Paul Swangard thinks a couple of other factors came into play at Nike over the past week.
You know, a thoughtful review of, the most recent report and really having an internal discussion about what it revealed.
But also, Swangard says the Lance Armstrong relationship was bigger than merely building a cycling business. It was about the Livestrong brand, including those 85 million or so yellow wristbands, and the fight against cancer, which Nike says it will continue to support. Several other Armstrong sponsors reacted today. Anheuser-Busch announced it will not renew its relationship with Armstrong at the end of this year. Energy food company Honey Stinger says it's removing Armstrong's image and endorsement from its product packaging. Oakley says it's reviewing the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency report as well as its relationship with Armstrong. When asked today whether Nike's action and Armstrong's resignation from Livestrong is an admission by Armstrong that the report is accurate, an Armstrong spokesman said no. Tom Goldman, NPR News.
In recent years, scientists have found hundreds of planets orbiting distant stars. Now they've discovered a planet whizzing around a star that's one of our closest neighbors. It's a star known as Alpha Centauri b. And the planet is the nearest ever spotted outside our solar system, as NPR's Nell Greenfield Voice reports.
If you're going to imagine interstellar travel, the star system called Alpha Centauri would be your first stop. Its 3 stars, Alpha Centauri A, B, and C, are only around 4 light years from our sun. That's far, far away, but it's still closer than everything else beyond our solar system, and that's why imaginary planets in Alpha Centauri are a staple of science fiction. Now, in the journal Nature, scientists say they've detected the first real planet there. A team of European astronomers used a telescope in Chile to closely observe Alpha Centauri b. They saw it make a telltale wobble that meant a planet's gravity was tugging on the star. Greg Laughlin is an astrophysicist at the University of California, Santa Cruz. He says Alpha Centauri is so well known, it's practically a household name.
And to find out that planet formation did occur there is just extraordinarily clear.
The newly detected planet has a mass that's similar to Earth, but it zips around its star once every 3 days. It's so close to its star that its surface might be made of super hot molten rock, more than 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't seem like a great place to live, but Laughlin says systems with a planet like this one often have more planets orbiting farther away from the star.
I think that the prospects are excellent for finding further planets in this system.
Perhaps even one in the so-called habitable zone, at a distance from the star where conditions